Hello guys, Lydia. So this is a video that I made back then on 0.1 on how you can scale your minion damage, and I want to revisit it again and try to make a better version of it, considering we have a lot of things that added in the game already. So this video will be about how damage work in PoE 2 and how it calculate and what order and what variable inside the damage calculations. The concept itself is going to apply to everything, but the context where I will explain all of this, especially when we're talking about sources, where you can get your damage from, that will be specifically for minions. So let's begin with the first step. The first step is to understand how the damage itself work on PoE 2. So in damage calculations, the first step is always begin from base damage. And base damage is where every other multiplier going to multiply from. And base damage in context of minions, it coming from plus level and also flat damage. And because this is the base damage, this is the reason why plus level is so strong on PoE 2, and this is what people are complaining about, because the plus level is way too strong, so you have to have it, there's no other options. On Spirit Walker, we have another leverage, which is a flat damage from Kaca Balance. I hope I spelled it right. Kaca Balance is going to get 60% of your weapon damage to your minion. And let's say that your main weapon have like 500 physical damage, and 60% of this, which is 300 flat damage, will be applied to your minion, but it's basically added to the base. And the same thing also go for level. However, for level, in context of minion, level not only giving you damage, but it's also going to give the minion more life. So the higher the level of the minion, the more damage you're going to have, the more life the minion going to have. So this especially is the base damage. So the next thing after base damage, we're going to have conversions. So conversion itself have two components. The first one is the actual conversion. So for examples like Arsonist, it has a physical, convert to fire. And these conversions that usually tie to the gem, this will apply first. So let's say that you have 1,000 base damage, and Arsonist, I think 70%. 70% of them will be converted to fire. So now you're going to have 300 fizz and 700 fire. So this is damage conversion, and this is always going to happen first. And the second part of conversion is damage as extra. And damage as extra is something you can find on companion, is on the passive tree. There is companion gain damage as extra chaos, or companion gain damage as extra cold. And for examples, let's just use the same base damage. Let's say that you have 1,000 base, and then you have conversion on the Arsonist, and then you have another modifier which is basically like 30% extra chaos. And that's mean now you have 300 fizz, 700 fire, and you have 300 chaos. And the reason why this is 300, because usually damage as extra is not specified on certain damage types. So it will take the base damage and take the portion of it. In this case, it's 30%. And if you have another one, for example, like damage extra cold, let's say you have another 20% as damage extra cold, that's mean now you have 200 cold, right? And this one is chaos. So this is a damage conversions. At this step, the game basically decide what kind of damage the minion going to deal, how much physical, how much fire, cold, chaos, and etc. And after conversions, we will have increase and more multiplier. And both of them is a multiplier, but it calculated a little bit differently. So for examples, let me make a new one. So for increase, let's say that we just ignore the conversion for the sake of the simplicity. And let's say that we begin with the 1,000 base damage, the same as before. And you have 50% increase here, let's say for Scepter. And then you have another 50% from like passive throw or something like that. So how increased damage is going to calculate is it going to summarize all the increase first. So you have 50% plus 50%, so it basically you have 100%. So you plus 100% damage, which is going to make the damage become 2,000. Now the more damage calculated differently. And let's say you have the same thing. You have 50%. You have 50% from your support gem 1, and then you have another 50% on your support gem 2. I know we don't have any 50% more damage than support gem, but just to make the calculation simple, instead of summarizing these two numbers, what more damage is going to did with the base damage, it's going to multiply each of them independently. So it's going to multiply by 1.5. So you now have 1500. And now this number is going to multiply by 1.5 again for the second multiplier. And you end up with 200 and 2050 damage. So that's the reason why more damage is better than increased damage. And in the context of this section over here, increased damage is going to happen first. So the base damage after the conversions, let's say that you don't have any conversion, so the base damage of the minion is 1000 and it stays 1000 fists, and it will apply to increase first. So let's say you have 100% increase, then the damage is going to calculate with this first. So now you have 2000, and then you have, let's say, 50 plus 50% like earlier. So the 2000 going to multiply by 1.5, it become 3000. And then it multiply again with another 1.5, it become 4500. And this is the reason why I said on the minion, you want the support gem that have as much multiplier as you can, because more damage usually come from support gem. And for the increased damage, this is like all over the place. You have from like passive tree, and then you can also get it from like Scepter. Scepter also have that. And then there's like Jewel and stuff, like Jewel, and etc. But for more damage, it usually only come from support gems. It's very rare to see this outside from support gem. On minion, there is one node that I know that give more damage, and that is a Hulking minion that make your minion become gigantic. It gives the minion 20% more damage. I think that's the only source that outside of support gem that give more multiplier. And the increase and more damage multiplier will also depending on the conversions. For example, like if in this context, let's say a physical convert to fire, like your arsonist, you have 300 fists and then 700 fire. If the wording is increased minion damage, it's going to apply to everything. But if, let's say, the modifier wording is increased minion fire damage, it only going to scale the fire damage, but not the physical portions. But I think in minion, most of the multiplier and increase is generic. Like increase is usually increased minion damage. The more damage, however, the more damage will have a lot more variants. For example, like health, it increase the physical portion. So if you do this on arsonist, this is a bad idea because you only have 300 physical. And scaling the 300 is a lot harder than scaling the 700. And this is why I always said, in support gem for minion, you always want a support gem that scale everything. So at this point, the game is already know what type of damage that you do from the conversions, and then it already multiply by the increase and more multiplier that match the damage type of the conversions. And the next one, the game going to decide if your minion doing crit or not. And if the minion crit, it's going to apply every single critical damage bonus that you have. So for example, like if your monkey have 400% of critical damage bonus, then that's mean whatever total of this will be multiplied by 5, right? 1 plus 4. And this is also the reason why if you want to look for DPS, you always go for crit, because this is another layer multiplier at the end of the calculation. And for the last one is double or triple damage. I don't think minion have this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I never see this for minion. So double and triple damage especially happen after the crit, so it's another layer of multiplier. And for a build that have it, this is also really strong. But for minions, since I don't think minion have these variables, I'm just going to mention it, but I don't think there's need more explanation on it. And double and triple damage is pretty simple. If the game decide that, okay, this is a double damage, then it will multiply the damage by 2. And if the damage is triple, then the damage will be multiplied by 3. So this is the calculations on the minion side. And then the next part is the calculations on the monster side. So the monster usually a modifier, like for examples, resistance. How much resistance the monster have, how much armor the monster have, and also so on and so forth. And you can fight resistance with something like curse. For examples, like if you use frostmage before, it deal mostly cold damage. The enemy will have some elemental resistance, so the way you bypass that is by using curse, like elemental weakness, to reduce the resistance. And for the monkey, mostly is a physical damage. the way you're going to bypass the armor on the target is by using armor break. And after this, this I think is the last one, which is basically a modifier that said take more damage. And this is something from, for examples like parry. Parry by default going to make the enemy take 50% more damage. And another way of this is Predator Mark, Fire Pounce. This one I think make the enemy take like 60% more damage if you're able to fit all the conditions. And the easy way to think about this one is this is the last layer of multiplier. So let's say that you deal 1,000,000 damage, the monkey, and the enemy have parry buff. So the enemy going to take 50% more damage, and that's basically they're going to take 1.5 million. And this is the reason why something like parry is really strong, because the multiplier is happen at the end, and it's going to affect your damage by a lot. So that's basically how the damage calculates. So the priority number 1 is to get your base damage high first. Doesn't matter how much multiplier you have, if your base damage is low, anything multiplied by 0 will always be 0. And for minion, the base damage number 1 is always from minion level. And this is the reason why in every guide that I make, I always said that you always want to have the plus minion first, either on your helmet, on your amulet, on your scepter. In my case, I'm using unique scepter, so I don't have that. And then you also have the base damage from the level itself. What is the level of your gem? And this is the reason why 20 level gem is expensive. And plus 1 corruption is also very, very expensive, because that plus 1 level going to give your minion a lot more base damage. And another way to get level is also from this gem over here. This is a unique jewel. It called Prism of Belief. It can give you plus 1 to plus 3 to level of Ultimate Companion skill. I only buy plus 2 because the plus 3 is ridiculously expensive. And this is another way you can get level for your minions. So once again, the plus minion is from the skill gem itself, and then plus 2 on your helmet, plus 3 on your amulet, and plus 4 on your scepter. For the last one, it's Prism of Belief. Prism of Belief is usually something I would recommend later on because it is very expensive. And the next thing after you get your minion level is to get the flat damage. And I think this is specific for Spirit Walker, because for other minion build, you do get flat damage from your scepter. For example, like this one, the ally in your presence have 11 to 17 attack fire damage. And also this one going to give you attack lightning damage. And this is a flat damage, and this is going to calculate into the base damage. On Spirit Walker, we do have a benefit from the catch up balance, which basically the companion gain attack damage equal to 60% of your main weapon damage. In my case, I do use the Tyrannic Grip. This one have 450, and some of you probably going to ask like, why you not using the Iron Runes? And this is because apparently the idol give more damage basically. The Iron Rune only give like 30% physical damage, and I think the number on the spear is just not that high. I think with 2 Iron Rune, this one become like 510, and apparently that 60 flat damage is not as good as 2 idol, which basically give 30% increased damage. And there is a case like this, because like the difference between this and you using Iron Rune is around 60 flat damage. And from the 60 flat damage, the minion only got 36. So maybe the flat damage is too small, and the increased damage end up making more sense. And this is kind of a special cases, but in general, you do want to get as much flat damage as you can, and you do want to get as much minion level as you can, and that's going to bring your minion base damage as high as you can. And the next one is conversions. On Companion, we have this note over here. Companion gain 4% damage extra chaos. And this is also 12% extra damage chaos. And this one is a cluster that give damage extra cold. And if I go inside the UI, you can see that we do deal cold damage and chaos damage. And we do deal some form of physical damage. Physical damage is still a big part of it. And this is the reason why I'm not really bothered with something like curses, wither, or all that stuff, because we don't have that much chaos damage. We don't have that much cold damage. And the next one is increase. Increase is something that you can find everywhere, basically. Like this node over here is increase, and your scepter is increase. I think normal scepter also have it. I don't have it on my scepter, but ally in your presence deal something increased damage. That is an increased damage multiplier. And then there's also something like this, which said ally in your presence, deal 40% increased damage. And there is also something that are more generic, which is minion damage. We can get from passive tree. We also get them from jewel like this. Minion deal 7% increased damage. So increased damage is the most common multiplier. and you're going to find a lot of them. And the next one is the more multiplier, which coming from your support gems. So for examples, Feeding Frenzy give 30% more damage, and then Master gives 7% more damage per each 3-5 minions. And some people just asking me that is this count to Master, and it does. So Master going to apply 7% for every single reviving type minion you have. So in this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this Master give 49% more damage per each different minion. And you can test this very simple. You see like base attack, we have 600k. And let's say that I turn off my Quadilla, and you can see the damage go down. You can check this very, very easily. And if I turn this back on, the damage will go up to 600k again. And attack speed is the same thing, even it doesn't really calculate in terms of like the damage calculations, because the attack speed is how many times you deal that damage per second. But attack speed is still a multiplier. For example, like if your minion deal 1000 damage and it hit 1 time every 1 second, that's mean you only deal 1000 damage. But if your minion deal 1000 damage and it hit 2 times a second, that means your minion deal 2000 damage per second. So attack speed is a global multiplier too. And we also have something like, for example, elemental armament. This is experimental. I don't recommend using this. I usually using rage. Like rage give you attack speed, which is nice. Even if you don't have the rage, you still have the multiplier from the attack speed. And when you have the rage build up, you have the 30% more damage, because maximum rage is 30 by default. As for the elemental armament, this is a little bit experimental. It's going to give you 12% more attack damage per elemental element. So if we can deal ignite, shock, and chill, that basically gives 36% more attack damage. So it's a little bit more than rage, and it doesn't have a build up, but it does rely on whether you have the elemental element on the enemy or not. So this is the reason why I say this is experimental. Something like Kurgan List. Kurgan List is not a more modifier, so this is not exactly 30% more damage. This is happen on the conversion state. And then for the minion, we also have another multiplier, which is coming from this node over here, which basically your minion are gigantic. And gigantic, if you hover over this, is your minion have 20% more life, 20% more damage, and 30% increased size. So this node is 20% more damage multiplier. And after the increase and more multiplier, now we are talking about crit. Now critical is not something that every minion could do. For example, like the monkey have a really high base crit chance, so it's very easy for the monkey to do crit. But for something like, let's say, Quadilla have a not that good of a base crit chance. Eventually it's still going to crit, but it's not really wise to scale crit when your base crit is too low. So scaling this, you will need a lot of minion crit chance, and you end up using a lot of resources for that. And that's mean you're also going to lose for something else. But once again, if you want to play crit on your minion, you have to make sure that your base crit of your minion is good enough. And next, I want to talk about something that a little bit less obvious. For examples, the monkey have a lot of attack. So there's a basic attack, there's 3 of them. There's also slam, and there's also the big slam, and there's also like the spinning stuff, and also on and so forth. And in the UI, all of them basically show the same number. In PoEDB, it's not the same. And if you play monkey, you should be able to see that the one skill that make a lot of damage is when the monkey spin and then slam. That is the attack that's going to deal like ridiculous amount of DPS. And if you go to PoEDB, you can see the list of the skill that the minion did. Now on this one skill that immediately caught the eyes is Quadrilla Boss Rack Slam, right? Because it have attack damage 300% and it also deal 200% more damage. This is literally the biggest multiplier that we can see on here. And I assume this is the final slam from after the monkey spin. Once again, this is a data mining, so we don't really have 100% sure which one is which. The Rack Slam is only happen after the monkey spin. And the boss spin, I assume, is this one, and it has a cooldown of 16 seconds. So when you play a monkey, the monkey not always going to do this spin. It's going to do the spin, and then it's going to do everything else, and then after a while, it's going to do the slam again. The assumption is the skill have a cooldown. Basically, the monkey only able to do the big attack every 16 seconds. And the idea is, if we have a modifier like this, which is new this league, this is a ring that you can make from Breach. So you basically go to your monastery, and in monastery, you're going to find the Genesis tree. And in Genesis tree, this is my passive tree for the tree. And on this section, it gives invigoration. So 5% chance for bird item to have crafted modifier. And this is minion has increased cooldown rate. And this is a generic cooldown recovery rate. So it's going to apply to command and also to the normal base skill. For examples, on the tree, you can also find cooldown recovery for something like this, but this one is specific. It only affects the cooldown rate for command skill. And the reason why I'm talking about cooldown recovery rate is because this cooldown recovery rate going to reduce the cooldown of the spin slam of the monkey. So if you don't have any cooldown recovery rate, the monkey only going to able to spin slam every 16 seconds. And now if you have a cooldown recovery rate, we can bring that cooldown down to around something like 9 seconds if my math is correct. So the monkey now able to do the spin slam every 9 seconds. I think we can agree if the monkey can use that skill more often, since that skill is the one that do a lot of DPS, this modifier technically is the DPS increase. And this cooldown recovery also going to affect something like Asmerian Wolf, where the damage basically coming from the Eternal Hunt. And the Eternal Hunt, it does deal a lot of DPS, but it has a very long cooldown. And the Eternal Hunt have a base cooldown of 15 seconds. So you can only use this skill every 15 seconds. And the durations of the Eternal Hunt is 8 seconds. So without any cooldown recovery rate, you basically have a 7-second window where the Asmerian Wolf cannot do damage because the Asmerian Hunt is on cooldown. But when you put the cooldown recovery rate here, cooldown recovery rate here, now the minion cooldown go down to 8 seconds. Now you basically can use the Eternal Hunt, and when the duration of the Eternal Hunt ends, the cooldown is already ready. You can use the skill again. And we can also see on the pair, like the pair have a slam. This is a slam skill. And if I take off the ring, the slam skill has a 5-second cooldown. And when I put in the cooldown recovery, now the bear able to do the slam every 2.2 seconds, so it can do the slam more often. But also one thing to consider is the AI of the minion. This is outside your control. This is just how GG is going to program how the minion behave. Some skill does have a priority, and if the skill have a priority, lowering the cooldown will mean that they're always going to use that skill whenever that skill is available. Having a cooldown reduction is going to make a lot of difference. And also cooldown recovery rate like this is only available on the ring, and it is new this league. And another one that I can find of is this one over here. This is a generic cooldown recovery rate too, but other than that, I don't think there's another source of it. Maybe we can find on Jewel. I forget if there is a Jewel have it or not, but this modifier is pretty rare to get. So that's basically on the minion side, right? I'm talking about the item that we use, why we use them, and then we also have something like Sniper Mark. Sniper Mark going to make the enemy take more critical damage bonus, and we also have something like Mark for Death, which is going to break the armor of your minion because most of the damage of the minion is physical. And you also have a note like this, which make the minion able to break armor, equal to 30% of physical damage dealt. This is a new setup. I'm still testing it, and if you guys interested, I will leave my PoE Ninja link on the descriptions. You can follow what I did with the build because I often change my build, and when I'm happy with it, I will make a video, but I prefer to testing first, and if it's good, then I will make a video about it. So that's for the Sniper Marks, and also something like Uruk Smelting. This I assume it works with Sniper Marks because Sniper Marks and Mark for that is the one that break armor on a single target. I assume the Uruk Smelting works, and Uruk Smelting going to make the enemy take 5% increased physical damage and up to 20%. And this basically the modifier that make the enemy take more damage. And the last one is also Refutation, and this is the reason why we are using this skill, because it's going to apply the parry debuff. And parry debuff is enemy take 50% more damage. In the passive tree, the reason why we are setting the weapon set 2 is because this weapon set 2 is mostly about parry debuff durations and increased parry debuff magnitude. I think the total of the magnitude here, you can get something like another 50% more. So the enemy takes 70 to 80% more damage, something like that, with all the parry debuff magnitude. And this is the reason why we have all the weapons set 2 to squeeze out the damage from the parry. And for the last one is the number of the minions. This is not going to apply to Spirit Walker as much because Spirit Walker, most of your damage is coming from the monkey. And in my case, it's coming from the monkey and also the Eternal Hunt of the Asmenian Wolf. The Quadilla, Dairotas, and like the Wolfpack does deal some damage, but it's not even close to the monkey or the wolf. But if you're talking about the minion like Leech or Infernalist, where you are stacking as much Reaver as you can, obviously the more Reaver you have, the more damage you're going to have. That's probably the last thing I can think about when we're talking about like how to improve your damage as a minion. So I think that's it for the video. I hope this explanation is going to help you on understanding if you want damage on your minion, what you should do and what you should look for. and how you can scale it even further depending on what minion do you play. And as usual, if you guys have any questions, just leave it in the comment below. I will try my best to answer it. And thank you everyone for watching. I really, really appreciate it. And I will see you on the next one.